Welcome to the Saturday in Athens podcast. I'm your host, Seth Saunders, and we are joined by a very special guest this week to preview not just the SEC championship game on Saturday, but also championship week across college football, which is ripe with CFP playoff implications. We have Chris Phillips with us, who is the man behind SEC Unfiltered and coming off one of the most epic season-long road trips there's ever been, the SEC football tour. Chris, we're fired up to have you on the show, brother. Welcome.
Seth, I appreciate you having me on, man. Yeah, it's been an incredible year, 14 straight weeks on the road. I know you and I were just talking off air. I had a blast. It was a season out of a dream. I am excited to kick the feet up this weekend and watch the Dogs and Texas battle in Atlanta on my TV. And we got a lot of fun stuff planned content-wise. Part of a big reason why I'm not going to that game. But, yeah, 14 weeks on the road, man. I obviously got to stop by Sanford Stadium, hang out with all the great Dogs. That game against Tennessee, that was an epic battle. Got to see that one in person. And actually saw Georgia a few weeks in a row there on the SEC Unfiltered Tour.
Yeah.
At the cocktail party, and then in Oxford, and then, of course, Athens. But, yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. It's going to be a great weekend. And the college football playoff continuing to take shape as we go into the weekend.
Yes, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to get you to give me the Mount Rushmore from the SEC football tour. What was, of all the stadiums that you went to, what was your favorite stadium experience? Whether that be just stadium itself or in-game experience, whatever it may be. What are you going to put that one at?
I got to go with LSU. I got to go with LSU. It's overall stadium, the stadium itself, the experience in the building, the atmosphere, the volume, which, again, maybe we could break these up. But when I just say favorite stadium, I got to go LSU, man. It's just different. Louisiana's a one of one. And I got the LSU at night experience. I also saw them win. That was the game against Ole Miss. They won in overtime, and we rushed the field. And so I got to go LSU.
Yeah, I feel like that was tough to beat. That one's on our list, so I get that completely. How about? No, you were in Oxford. Obviously, we're in Athens. I know you went down to the cocktail party. What was your favorite? Let's say town. What was your favorite college town that you got to visit this fall?
Yeah, Seth, I feel like this is a question you were asking on purpose, because anybody who saw the clip, I mean, I'll die on the hill that Athens is the best college town in America. I mean, it's just, and I don't even think it's like that. I don't even think there's that much of a debate. Like, if you go to Athens and experience the town itself, I know I had a lot of pushback from Tennessee fans, Alabama fans, Florida fans, every other rival fan base you can think of, but I will die on that take that Athens is the best college town in America. It's just incredible, man. The classic city delivered everything you want, need. It feeds right into the university. Athens is an awesome place. So Athens by far best college town.
Yeah, we're biased, so it's tough for me to argue with that. I mean, we love it. I do think it's a magical place. I just think the way it's situated from a geographic perspective, with downtown being right outside the Arch, and then you're right there at North Campus, which is beautiful, and then you roll down the hill, and then boom, Sanford's right there in your face, and man, it's really tough to beat. And we've been to some other ones, and I get it, man. You know, everybody loves their town, and so I'm sure people have gripes, but look, Athens is tough to beat, especially if you're wanting to go out and be social on a Friday or Saturday evening. There's not
and I saw some great ones.
Places like it.
Yeah, I saw some great ones, man. I mean, Knoxville's an awesome town. Tuscaloosa was cool. Auburn's beautiful and quaint, but yeah, Athens, to me, it really takes the cake. It's got everything.
How about from the food scene perspective? Which town did you think had the best fare and libations? Let's put it that way.
Seth, I got to go back to Louisiana, man. I hate to repeat, but man, the food down in Louisiana, I mean, it's the most unique. It's probably the most delicious. I mean, I had crawfish etouffee. I had gator. I had boudin balls. I had red beans and rice. I had jambalaya at the tailgate. I mean, it's just. It's not even. Here's the thing, Seth. It's not even a fair fight when it comes. I could have done an entire food vlog in Baton Rouge. So that's why I'm almost like, a lot of the conversation, it's like LSU, and I know LSU fans love to hear this, but it's like, everything about that experience was a one of one. So when it comes to food, man, it's just the culture so strong. I will say, I'll give an honorable mention here, though, if I had to go a different direction, because we're gonna drop, Seth, to your point. SEC Unfiltered tour superlatives. I'm going to try to divvy it up and not obviously give every school one thing. I will say that the brisket in Texas, they don't mess around. They don't mess around. I went to Terry Black's in Austin. I had some barbecue in College Station as well. Yeah, they don't mess around when it comes to barbecue in Texas. I would say that'd be the other most notable food I had was the brisket out there in Texas.
Yeah, that's tough to beat. I got siblings that went to school at KU, and so Kansas barbecue don't play either. But man, Texas barbecue has got its own special place. It's just it's a class of its own for sure. Well, look, man. Obviously, huge week this week, right? A lot of things on the line. It has been a wild college football season, and in some ways, just from a fan's perspective, probably as rewarding a season from the viewer perspective as I can remember in a long time, man. And maybe some of that's the 12 team, but I just think in general with the portal and with NIL, I think the breadth of talent that's spread out across the game now is different than it was before, and thus we're getting a bit more of a competitive balance, or at least that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, Seth. I think with the portal, with NIL, I don't think some of your it was interesting when all that was rolled out. I think a lot of us thought that, hey, the rich are going to get richer, and the top 10 teams they're going to be able to hoard all of the talent because they're going to be able to pay for all these guys. And it's actually been the opposite. I think the talent has dispersed more so because guys, there's more opportunities elsewhere. Other programs have NIL as well, and there's opportunities to go play. You don't have to sit there and wait 3-4 years your turn. And so, I think schools like a Georgia, like an Alabama, like a Texas, like an Ohio State, there's not necessarily this monopoly on talent, right? I mean, Georgia's still deep, but, back in the day, they were, 3-4 deep on the offensive and defensive line. And I think, maybe some of the reasons you see some struggles from a program like Georgia this year is because you don't have quite that level of depth. You still have good depth. You don't have great depth that you had. There's more good players on more good teams. And so I think that's why you're seeing the variety in results. I think that's why we're seeing the increased parity. And, I mean, again, Seth, you mentioned the tour. Just getting to see that in person firsthand. We saw so many big-time upsets, so many competitive football games. And, again, I think it's got everything to do with the portal and NIL and just, a lot of good players going to a lot of different places. And it's given a lot of these middle-of-the-pack teams a chance that, if everything comes together, they've got enough good players to knock off some of these big dogs.
Man, let me tell you when I kind of had figured out the script had flipped and I had maybe been seeing it from a lens that was opposite of how it's actually going to be. And that's when SMU joins the ACC. And in their deal, they said, hey, guys, y'all can keep the TV money for like the first 6 years. We're good on that side. We just want that big conference appeal with us. We'll take care of the money. Okay. And I thought then, I said, oh, that's right. They were the OGs of the NIL. So they're going to figure this out. And that kind of clued me in like, hey, man, there's going to be places popping up now that can get kids to come because, A, they have some financial ability there. They offer immediate play at time where, to your point, man, I feel like before going to a place like Georgia, going to a place like Alabama, going to Columbus and going to Ohio State, that was your pathway to the bag in the NFL. Well, that's been removed now. So, man, I just think it opens up a lot of doors for a lot of kids, and I think you're seeing the effects of that already. So, who knows what that picture will look like in 3, 4, 5 years, man? I mean, and look at SMU; they've been a great case study, 11-1 this year. I mean, in the driver's seat for a playoff berth. So, just a different world, brother. And I think a good world. To be fair, man, I like it. I've always wanted the athletes to be able to operate in the market. The example we've always talked about is, look, man. If I go to Georgia and I'm a world-class flute player and the New York Symphony calls me and says they want to pay me for a gig in the summer, I ain't got to ask nobody, and I'm not going to lose my scholarship because of that. So why shouldn't an athlete be different, man? I think it's good for the kids and just like everything else, new levels, new devils. So there's different things, but I think overall it's going to be a good differentiator for college sports.
Yeah, I think so too, Seth. I mean, I think the increased parity, I think that, listen, when the upset is happening to your team, it's not the most fun thing, but I told somebody this past weekend. It's like, maybe we just have to stop and accept that this is the new norm in college football, and it's awesome. Like it's awesome. upsets left and right, and it's unpredictability. And I think this is a lot more fun than there only being 2 or 3 or just 4 like elite teams, and then there being this massive gap. Now, again, if you were one of those few elite teams, I don't know, maybe every Georgia fan wouldn't agree that this is more fun necessarily with the ups and downs and the struggles or whatever. But yeah, I think as a whole, and I've said this many times, Seth, too, that the business of college football has never been better. I think the game from the diehard fan perspective, you could argue has never been worse, because I just don't think fans are still – I don't know if they're ever going to get used to really the portal and NIL and their favorite players leaving and stuff like that. Like I've talked to many common fans, Seth, that will tell you that college football to them is less likable now because it's gotten more professional like the NFL. But again, for guys like you and I, for those of us in the content space, I mean, listen, the business has never been better. The ratings continue to go up. The product's getting better on the field. The players and the athletes obviously are getting better. And you know, it's just more and more and more fun to watch. And the ratings are going up, right? So, I mean, you know, it's we're in an interesting time in the history of the sport. But, again, as long as those ratings go up and the business continues to do well, we're going to continue to see the evolution of the game.
Let me ask you about another byproduct of the NIL and transfer portal and changing the landscape of the college game is on the coaching side of things, right? Now, last year we see Chip Kelly leave his post as the head guy at UCLA to take the OC job with his former player Ryan Day at Ohio State, and now announced yesterday Gus Malzahn is going to go to Florida State and be the OC there. And I think we all kind of know the writing's on the wall with that. It's because, look, man, I don't want to be the CEO of this deal. I don't want to do all this. I don't want to fool with all this. I don't want to salary cap manage. I don't want all that stuff. I just want to coach ball. And so let me just go somewhere and do that. Do you think there is going to be some runway and some space where we see, let's say, the longevity of the college coach change drastically from, say, the eras of Bobby Bowden, Tom Osborne, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think absolutely, Seth. I mean, I think you can look at Kirby Smart as a great example. I don't think he's going to coach another 15 years. I think Kirby might have, you know, realistically from Georgia folks I talked to, 5 to 6 years maybe. But, I mean, yeah, I don't think the days of like Lou Holtz and Bobby Bowden and guys going into their 70s or what have you, I don't know how much of a reality that is anymore. I mean, look, the greatest of all time walked away at the end of last year because he had just had enough. Like, let's call it for what it is. He was tired of the way college football was. And, you know, I think to survive in this new college football and certainly thrive, and I think, again, this is what makes Kirby so great, you got to be a grinder. Like, you got to really love it, be a football guy, love to get after it, love to get your hands dirty, like with what goes into recruiting and portal and managing NIL and, you know, having to hire a general manager and, again, just everything that goes with it. You really got to love the grind part of it. And to your point, Seth, I just don't think everybody loves that part. Like, some guys do just want to wake up, coach ball, go home, and be done with it. They want to take the Steve Spurrier approach. They want to play golf for 6 months out of the year and go coach 6 months out of the year, and that be it. And, you know, at this point, man, it's a 24/7, 365 around the clock kind of job. And yeah, and it takes a toll on you. And I think too, Seth, as good as the money is, I mean, at some point, you know, you're making 10, 11, 12 million a year. You ain't got to coach 30 years no more. I mean, you get a solid 10-year career in, you're set for, I mean, you get a couple years in, you're set for life. But, you know, you can go coach 10 years, you'll be done, you're good, and that's it. That's all she wrote. You can sail off in the sunset. So, I mean, that's why I think a Kirby Smart, you know, I think he obviously wants to win a few more titles, but I think he gets himself, I mean, let's just say 2 or 3 more national championships. You know, I think you'll see him sail off in the sunset within a decade. I don't think he's going to be coaching at Georgia in like 20 years or anything. And I just think it's more so the nature of the game and the demands that it takes. And, you know, I know Kirby's situation, he's got kids. I think he's got like a young son and everything. So that type of stuff plays into it too, because again, it's just the demand is so high. It's taking you away from your family and other things you can do. And again, with the money you're getting, you just don't have to do that anymore. So to your point, Seth, I think you're going to see it more and more, coaches making chess, not checkers moves, whether that be retiring and you're always going to have guys that stick around, right? Some guys that just love ball that they can't imagine doing anything else, but you're going to, you know, we're going to see more and more situations of guys retiring early or taking a coordinator job versus being a head coach. We're probably going to see it this offseason with guys going from G5 head coaches to Power 4 coordinators. We saw that last year with Kane Womack. So
Mm-hmm.
I think certainly to your point, Seth, with the ever-changing landscape, we are going to see that more and more.
Let's move on the field. Obviously, big one this weekend in Atlanta. Texas and Georgia round 2. Obviously, the first round went to the Dogs, and it was pretty convincing. I thought it was, I don't know about the most complete game they played all year, because I'll be honest, I still think the offense left quite a bit to be desired that night, but the defense carried the day, right? And I also think, too, I don't know that Quinn was fully healthy that night. So I'll be interested to see how things play out. Obviously, tough to beat same team twice in 1 year. So Dogs are going to battle that. I was also, too, Chris, I'm interested to get your opinion on this. I thought in game 1, Sark's game plan was different than I thought it was going to be. He's so great about using pre-snap eye candy and motion to get favorable matchups. And, man, I just didn't think they did a bunch of that. And Georgia's had problems with that all season. And so my expectation is it will be different Saturday night. I think Sark is going to have some different things dialed up and get those guys in space against a Georgia secondary that has admittedly struggled in coverage and struggled again Friday night, even against a Georgia Tech team that doesn't pass it super well. So what are your initial thoughts on that game, and kind of where do you see things going on Saturday evening?
Yeah, so I think first things first, when I think about this game, there are some in the national media that want to write this off as well. Both teams are in the playoff, and it doesn't mean a whole lot. Yes, it does. It absolutely does. I think that's a foolish narrative if it's one you're pushing. Kirby Smart has talked many, many times about how much the SEC championship means to him. I got a buddy that worked at Georgia on that second national championship team that beat Ohio State and won it all. And he mentioned to me the way Kirby is wired, that I think it was 2021, if I recall, Seth, that they lost the SEC title but won the national championship. I think that was the year. So he was mentioning to me that, like, Kirby after the season was pissed because he felt like they should have had another ring. It means a lot to Kirby Smart and Georgia to go to the SEC championship, play their best, and win it. And then for Texas, obviously, again, being their first season in the SEC, revenge on the mind from that first matchup, and certainly what winning the SEC would mean for Texas in year 1 in the league. When you speak specifically on the matchup, I think to your point, it's the chess match between Sarkisian and Kirby is going to be fascinating, because they're going to change at the game plan. Texas has to, right? Gave up 7 sacks in that game. Quinn Ewers was not great. Offensively, they got shut down. They got bullied up front. So they're going to have to do something different, to your point.
When
I look at this game, I think most are going to pick Texas in this game, Seth. I do. I think most are going to lean on it is really – and it is. It's difficult to beat a team twice because, you go back to the drawing board and make certain corrections and adjustments, what have you. And I know Georgia, didn't look great against Georgia Tech. Survived by the hair of their chin, what have you. I will say this, though. I think something getting lost in the shuffle. Carson Beck's playing a lot better lately. I was at that Tennessee game. He was brilliant in that football game. Had 5 touchdowns in the game against Georgia Tech. I think it's going to be a really, really good football game from the standpoint. I think it's going to come down to the wire. But I'm going with the Dogs, Seth. Listen, at the end of the day, in a game like this, DNA traits win out, and Georgia has those DNA traits to where this kind of reminds me, Seth, it's eerily similar of the first time these two teams played. Georgia hadn't been playing great. They just had that high-scoring game against Mississippi State, and everybody in their right mind is picking Texas to beat Georgia in the football game. And what does Georgia do? Lights are shining brightest. Kirby Smart just knows how to get his team ready to play their best when it matters most. And that's what they did. And so, I was in College Station and saw Texas. I was in Austin the week prior, saw Texas against Kentucky. So I've seen this Texas team a few weeks in a row. They're elite on the defensive side. Broughton, Ant Hill, the linebacker, their front 7. They are elite, truly. That defense is one of the best in the country, if not the best in the country right now. Jade Barron on the back end, they are really, really good at all 3 levels. I think for Georgia, you have Tate Ratledge in this game. You didn't have him the first go around. Kelvin Banks for Texas on their offensive line. He's dealing with a bit of an injury. It'll be interesting to see, follow that. Is he going to go in this one? I just, again, man, I go back, and I know it's so cliche, but I go back to Kirby Smart. Who's that coming down the track? It's Kirby Smart yet again in the SEC title. He's been in this spot before. I think he's going to have Georgia ready to go, ready to play their best. I don't think Texas isn't going to get behind 23-0 like they did the first time. But I don't trust Quinn Ewers either, if I'm being totally honest. Like, listen, they've looked impressive. Texas has. They've handled their business. It's not like the offense has been world beaters. And I think Kirby, again, listen, there's only so many adjustments you can make if you're Sark. If I'm Kirby and Glenn Schumann again, no pun intended, I'm sending the dogs. Like, we're going to live in his back pocket and make him beat us. Then we'll make some adjustments if he does. But I'm forcing the issue when it comes to Quinn Ewers. I'm seeing if I can get the football off and get some mistakes. I mean, Kirby and Glenn Schumann are going to have a great game plan. I think they will bring the heat. Again, 7 sacks in that first game. Don't know if they get to that number. And I like the way Carson Beck has been playing. His receivers have got to help him out. They got to catch the freaking football, man. Georgia's receivers, even when I was at the Tennessee game, it's crazy how hard his receivers make him work at times and how bad it makes him look at times. I think continuing to utilize the tight end with Delp and Jurasic and getting those guys involved. We'll see if Trevor Etienne, you probably know his status better than I do, if he's going to be able to give it a go. But I think Georgia finds a way, man. I got Dogs 23-21 over Texas. I think Dogs find a way. I trust Kirby Smart in this spot. Listen, I went against Kirby Smart in the first round, and I got burned for it. If I'm going to be on the losing side, I'm going to be on the losing side believing in the guy with the G on his chest, and that's Kirby Smart.
Yeah, I want to throw some at you and see what you think about it. I have been of the opinion this year that they have had a bit of a player leadership problem. And not in a negative way, Chris. Just I don't think they have an alpha, especially in the offensive room, to kind of when things are sideways, to kind of amp it up. And maybe more importantly, I think the value of player leadership is the standard is the standard. And the standard's not just on Saturday, but it's Monday morning at 5 o'clock. It's Tuesday afternoon at Bloody Tuesday. You know what I'm saying? I think what has happened with this team, or what I have gathered, is they tend to play to the opponent. So I don't think it's coincidence that gigantic game under the lights against Tennessee, they play well. Gigantic game under the lights against Texas, they play well. I think the only thing that kind of runs in the face of that is the Alabama game in Tuscaloosa. Obviously, they get boat raced in the first half, but even then, I think the way they respond in the second half speaks to that spirit as well. And so I have wondered at times if Kirby has had to step into that and say, "Hey, look, I will do that. I will be the guy that leads the charge on this." And I'm not trying to downplay guys like Jalen Walker, who's outstanding and does a great job. It's just I don't think they have a guy like, say, a Nakobe Dean, or even Javon Bullard or somebody of that nature, where they're making sure guys are being accountable day to day. And I'm interested because, to your point, man, it's a huge one Saturday night. Everybody and their mama knows it's a huge one. And so I'm also of the opinion, unlike Joe Tessitore, I don't know that the Dogs have punched their ticket yet. So, and maybe that's PTSD from them losing SEC title games and getting left out. But I'm just telling you, man, I think they need to win the football game, just because, to remove all doubt. All right, Al Davis, just win, baby, because they control the boat, they control the destiny. And so, yeah, man, I mean, what have you seen? Do you think there's maybe a leadership void there on the player side, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, Seth. I mean, I think the dynamic of every team is different, not to sound like coach speak here, but I think, Kirby would tell you the dynamic of every team is different. And, I mean, who are those guys? I mean, I look on the offensive side, I don't know that Carson Beck naturally is that dude. And outside of him, I just don't, who is that dude on both sides of the football that when things aren't going the way they should be, or they're not going right, somebody puts their foot down and says, "Hey, we got to fix this. We got to get it going." So I do think for sure, I think that can play into it. I think also too, just again, Seth, the parity of college football. There's just, there's teams that have talent that have Georgia doesn't have quite the elite level depth they used to, and other teams have stockpiled good players, and it's made for crazy results, because this isn't just a Georgia thing. I mean, they're not the only ones that have, I mean, it's all across college football. So. And that's what I will say. Like, I give Texas a lot of credit. They've handled their business. They don't have that, that quote unquote bad loss. Although I would say that Georgia, I mean, they've got 2 losses, and I was at both games, ironically enough, the game at Tuscaloosa and the game at Oxford. It's not like Georgia lost to nobodies. I mean, they lost to teams that were really, really good. So, I think you make a valid point, Seth, with the leadership perspective. But I do think, to your point, that I don't want to say Georgia's bored, but it is like, it's like, man, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like when they play the very best, they play their best. And when they play the Mississippi States and dang, maybe even a Georgia Tech, they kind of play with their food a little bit. It just, it's kind of, I don't know, man. It is kind of hard to, hard to make sense of it. But, that's why, again, I just think that the mood is going to be very similar from a lot of people, like it was going in. And I was guilty of it too. I was like, man, like I just can't pick Georgia because they haven't played well of late. They were kind of sluggish against Auburn. They were sluggish against Mississippi State, didn't look great. And then, bang, they punched Texas right in the face. So it's like, if Texas wins, they will have earned it because they think they're going to get Georgia's best shot. And, I'm just banking on, I think Georgia's best shot is going to beat Texas. I do. I think the one thing we can say about Georgia that we can't necessarily say about Texas to the fullest degree, Georgia has been tested. I mean, really, really. Number one strength of schedule, Seth. I know you know that. Number one strength of schedule. I'm not a Texas schedule hater. Listen, they've played who they played and they beat them, but the grind Georgia went through to get here, a little bit different than the grind Texas went through to get here. And I'll tell you this, Seth, too. Two things. Number one, I do think Georgia's going to play out no matter what. I don't see. I know you have PTSD. Because you know how I know you have PTSD, Seth? Because I tweeted this like 2 weeks ago, or maybe it was a week ago, when I was like, guys, stop freaking out on the timeline. There's no way an SEC title game loser gets left out. Like y'all are. I mean, I know y'all are just looking for things to talk about, but like it's not. And I had a bunch of people, a lot of them Georgia fans, come to my mentions like, well, what about last year? This isn't. I'm like, well, I mean, it's a 12-team playoff, so it's a little bit different, but I know there's a lot of PTSD there. The other thing I'll tell you, Seth, is this, just on a fun note. I was in Austin 2 weeks ago, and whether it was in jest or they were serious, and I think they were serious, I had Texas fans tell me, hey, we want Georgia. We want Georgia again. And, Seth, my response was, no, you don't. No, you don't. You don't. Because this was before the SEC title was decided. We thought it was Bama that was going to go, so they lost to Oklahoma. So, no, you don't. So they're going to get what they asked for. I just, and again, I could be wrong. I mean, Texas is a very, very good football team. Georgia's going to have to play well, but I just, again, man, I trust the Dogs in this spot. I think for the grind they've been through to get here, they're battle tested. And again, I do think they will play their best in a game that matters most. I fully expect Georgia to play their best in this one.
You bring up a great point about Carson, though. I mean, you were there for, in my opinion, the play that turned his season. And it was the scramble where he takes the lick at the end of the play and pops up. And, man, it was almost like smelling salts, right? It took that many games, but he hits the smelling salts. Now, maybe coincidentally or not, Tennessee was also the night that we flipped Monroe Freeling to left tackle. Ernest Green been battling a shoulder injury. I think everybody would admit he has struggled mightily compared to how he performed last year. And they have seemed, I think, more cohesive along the O-line since then. And I just think since that run, man, Carson got his feet back under him. He looks like the guy everybody anticipated was going to be in the Heisman chase and be the number one quarterback coming out come April. And obviously that hasn't all played out. But look, man, you look at him make throws each week and you go, oh, yeah, that's right. That's why he was number one on the big board, because he makes throws that guys can't make. And I think there's a reason Kirby's been so steadfast that he's the guy. Look, we're not making a switch. He's our guy. We're either going to swim or we're going to drown, but he's going to be the guy. And I think there's something to that. And it seems that the guys buy that too, which I think is most important. But I mean, look, man, he makes throws. Look at the touchdown pass to Dom Lovett in the fourth quarter on Friday night. I mean, that's a throw maybe three guys in college football make. And so, like, I think he can be a difference maker if he's lighting it up. Now, to your point, Friday night was also the first time all season I think we saw the drops get to Carson. He usually very calm, very emotionless almost. He's like, boys, like, we got to figure this out. Like, we're ending drives because we can't catch it during football. And yeah, man, it's been a bugaboo. I think if not first, at least second in drops across FBS. I mean, it's been a problem. 37 for the year. So they got to play clean on Saturday night. So
Well, and that's to your point, Seth. I mean, here's the thing. I got to be honest. I trust Texas's group of playmakers more than Georgia's right now. I mean,
Yep.
Isaiah Bond, Silas Bolden, Matthew Golden, Trey Wisner in the backfield, Gunnar Helm at tight end. Like, I trust them more than what Georgia's featuring because, to your point, the drops and the inconsistencies. Now, what's interesting, and I don't know if I would have said, I know I wouldn't have said this a few weeks ago. I think I may trust Carson Beck more than Quinn Ewers right now. I think what's interesting about this matchup, Seth, is that I remember going into round one and we said that we felt like this game was going to be determined based off quarterback play. I know for a lot of games people say that, but it really felt like a battle of Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers. You got these two guys, these two gunslingers. Whoever plays best is going to win. Well, I mean, Georgia won by 15 points, and he threw 3 picks. He played terribly, really. I mean, he didn't play well at all, and they still won by 15 points. So, and I know both sides can play these hypothetical like games that make themselves do better. I mean, Texas is sitting there saying, "Man, boys, if we don't get off to a 23-0 hole, like we got these dudes, we're fine." But I mean, from the Georgia side, you really again have to think like, "Man, Carson, if you play turnover-free football, we're going to win." That's it. That's it. Just don't turn it over. You've trust your arm, trust your abilities, make those throws. But like, if we can play clean football, we're going to win. So, I mean, Texas, I'm sure is thinking, man, we can't get off to as bad a start as we did last time, right? I mean, it's just almost mathematically impossible. I don't know if I don't want to tempt the football guys. I don't know if Carson Beck can play worse. I mean, he was terrible. No touchdowns, 3 picks. They were like 170. So, I think that's got to give you a lot of confidence in your Georgia. You're getting a Carson Beck that is on the upswing, that has found some momentum, probably found a lot of his confidence back. But to your point, listen, it's so cliche, but cliches are cliches because they're true a lot of the times. Seth, this is going to be a football game. Comes down to 3 or 4 plays. It'll come down to 3 or 4 or 5 plays. Can Georgia's guys make the plays in those moments? And there's going to be a play, at minimum one of those. You got to turn a 50-50 ball into a 70-30 ball. You got to go. You got to help your quarterback. You got to make a big catch. You got to make a big play if you're one of Georgia's receivers or at the tight end spot or whatever. So I worry, funny enough, less about Carson Beck, more about those playmakers on the outside and them making plays against a really, really good Texas defense.
Well, that one's going to be awesome. I mean, I think it's obviously going to determine a lot. It's going to determine who gets a bye, all these things. A lot of dominoes are going to fall in Atlanta on Saturday evening. Some other huge ones too, though, Chris. I mean, Friday night we start with the battle for the G5 spot, right? You got Tulane now having to go up to Michie Stadium in West Point and play the Black Knights, one of the surprises of this college football season. I think Tulane, in a lot of ways, played themselves out of a potential spot in the playoff. They will obviously drop in the rankings after their loss to Memphis. And then you got another, I think, really, really interesting matchup on the blue turf on Friday night with UNLV and Boise State. You got Coach Odom and Coach Marion and that go-go offense rolling in there, and they got plenty of talent coming out of the city of sin. And I'm going to tell you something, man. It's going to be super, super interesting to see if they can make something happen. I think in a lot of ways, Boise leans on their stud, and they should. But they're going to have to throw the football a little bit, I think, to beat UNLV. So 2 big games on Friday night. What do you see out of those? What are you looking towards? What's caught your eye about those 2
Yeah,
matchups?
I to your point, I think Tulane probably played themselves out, losing that game to Memphis. Really impressive showing by the Memphis running back in that one, ran all over them. And, it just continues with the college football madness. You think you know something, and then it turns completely on its head with Tulane losing that football game. Army's been a really fun story this year. I'd probably lean the way of Army. I'd probably make the pick. I'll say Army gets it done. I would lean Army in that game and go with Army. Yeah, Boise State UNLV is the big one, the fun one I'm excited for, at the G5. Because to your point, I think Brennan Marion's a guy that's going to be getting some calls for some OC jobs, I think, obviously this cycle. And it seems like he always is. He's always kind of a guy, near the top of the list. And, man, to get a look, I haven't – to be honest with you, man, I've seen the stats. I've seen some highlights. I haven't gotten much of a look at Ashton Genty. Like, I haven't sat down and watched him. I mean, Seth, I haven't really just sat down and watched many games this year, being on the road
yeah, you've been
14
busy.
weeks. Yeah. So I haven't seen a first look, gotten like a full game look at Ashton Genty. So I'm excited to do that. But Boise State on the blue turf, man, it's you got to go to their turf, literally and figuratively. And I think if Boise State can win, I mean, we feel pretty confident saying they're going to be that G5 representative. So a lot on the line for them. I'd probably lean the Broncos and the blue turf just because it's so hard to win there. But I think, to your point, with that high-flying UNLV offense, I mean, you got to feed your stud, but you are going to have to keep up offensively. I don't know if just ground and pound is going to be able to do enough there. So I'd lean Boise State and Army, but those are going to be some really, really fun games.
Yeah, man, I think it's a great appetizer for the SEC championship meal on Saturday evening. It's just it's a fun couple games. I love Brennan Marion. I love his story. I love the fun fact that he was the OC at Howard when they go out to UNLV and overcome the biggest spread in history and win straight up. Like, I love all of it, man. GJ Kenny's wide receiver at Tulsa, like all these cool little subplots around his story, and I just think he's got them playing, man. And also too, let's just have an honest conversation. If they start putting the go-go diamond chains on the school bookstore, like sell out real quick, brother. Especially one will be coming to this Christmas tree because I'd have one. So yeah, man, I like their story for sure. Let me talk to you about the initial game on Saturday afternoon, noon kick, Big 12 title game in Jerry World in Arlington. Iowa State playing Arizona State. Let's just talk about this, brother. 133 years they've been playing football in Ames, Iowa. This is the first time in school history they got 10 wins. Historic season for the Cyclones. Outstanding job done by Matt Campbell in building that program up and getting them to this point. And then Arizona State, man, I think maybe has one of the more underrated player stories in the country. You got Sacramento State transfer Cam Scatteraboo coming in. Some people are talking about maybe he should get an invite to New York as the fourth guy based on his production and what the Sun Devils have done. What are your thoughts on that game, and what are you looking forward to most in that matchup?
Seth, my first thought, if I'm being totally honest, is what a weird Big 12 championship with Iowa State and Arizona State. I mean, you talk
100%.
about realignment, like just so random. It feels like the most random game ever. It's been an incredible year for the Cyclones. That is crazy. I mean, they've got a pretty solid program. So to think first double-digit win season in program history is pretty telling. And then, you mentioned Cam Scatteraboo is so much fun to watch. He is an absolute beast. Saw him against Mississippi State earlier in the year. Love their head coach, Dillingham, I believe it is. He gave his bonus to all of his assistants, which was so cool. Because of that, I'm going to go with the Sun Devils. I'm going to go Arizona State. I got to be honest with you, Seth. I don't know a ton about both these teams. I couldn't go down the entire starting 22 or anything. But I think that Arizona State's going to have the best player on the field in Scatteraboo. So I'll go with Arizona State and Dillingham and the Sun Devils in that one.
Man, I think what's so cool about his story is this 2 years in a row we got a story like this, right? I mean, you had Cody at Mizzou last year with a very similar profile, going on to have a monster year and kind of having the program right on his shoulders. I mean, you look in a lot of ways at Mizzou's struggles and you go, well, maybe it's because we discounted how great a running back they had last year and what a big piece he was to that puzzle on offense. I mean, I just think it's such a cool story. And yeah, to your point, wild matchup in the Big 12. And I'm sure just like everyone drew it up in that conference, Arizona State picked last in the conference by the media preseason.
Yeah, that conference really cannibalized itself. So it's picked. I did not know that. Picked last in the conference and you're in the title game. That is crazy.
Yeah, Kenny Dillingham gonna make a lot of friends there in Tempe for years to come. All right, two big ones Saturday night. I think the one in Indy is the one folks are most surprised about, obviously, after the massive upset at the Horseshoe on Saturday afternoon. We are now getting the Nittany Lions of Penn State playing Dan Lanning, one of our personal favorites, and his Oregon Ducks at Lucas Oil on Saturday night. What's your feel on that? I mean, you think Penn State has got a chance in that game? I'm very interested with how that matchup could play out.
Seth, I think Penn State absolutely has a chance, but it's hard for me to trust James Franklin in a big game. They are really, really good against the teams they're supposed to beat, and against the teams they are not supposed to beat, they don't win. So listen, the college football playoff, we're being honest, it was made for James Franklin, right?
Yeah.
10-2 every year, always was the bridesmaid, never the bride. Now he finally gets to get in the playoff, right? Because it's expanded. So I'm going to roll with Oregon in this game. They've been really, really consistent all year long, have sat in that top spot all year. I mean, I to your point, I think it's going to be a close game. I think this could be a really interesting game, but I got to go with the Ducks.
All right, the other, I guess you could say, dessert portion of the program for the title game meal this weekend is Clemson and SMU in Charlotte at Bank of America. This is a win or go home for Clemson from a postseason perspective with the playoffs. They played themselves out of a potential at-large with how things went down at the other Death Valley last weekend. And SMU, man, I mean, the Pony Express is up and running and have a chance to, I think, plant a flag in the ground and say, look, Dallas is here, baby. So where do you sit on that? You think Rhett Lashley and the boys take care of business, or do you think Dabo and Clemson sneak their way into the playoffs with that automatic berth?
And I think, Seth, this is an eliminator for the ACC. I think whoever loses this game probably is not getting in the playoff, and that includes SMU. I think if SMU finishes the season 11-2, and I just think with their resume, who they've beaten or haven't beaten, I think we could very well see them get left out. Clemson win or go in de facto winning the ACC, and certainly Clemson's out if they lose. And this Seth is this is a great game for why we shouldn't have the automatic qualifiers or automatic bids, because Clemson getting into the playoff will be a travesty. I mean, they got boat raced by Georgia in week 1. They book into their season by getting beat by an SEC team, and we're going to get them in anyways over a South Carolina team that'll probably get left out that beat them. So, I mean, try to make sense of that if you can. I'm going to go SMU in this game. I am. I'm going to go SMU. I don't trust Clemson in a big game like this. I like SMU a lot. Rhett Lashley, what he's done this year, really, really impressive. And I just don't trust Clemson. At this point, I really don't. Defense is still elite. I think Cade Klubnik's a fine player, but I think it's been a magical season for the Ponies. I think they keep it going. I think they're going to listen. The football gods are fair in a lot of ways, and I think if they're as fair as I think they are, Clemson doesn't deserve to be in. They will keep them out. I think SMU will finish them off and get it done.
All right, last question for you tonight, brother. You brought up South Carolina, who I think is a, compelling case study for this 12-team playoff. Of the 3-loss SEC teams who all have their own arguments, if you were sitting on the committee come Sunday, which one would get your vote to enter the inaugural college football playoff? 12-team college football playoff.
So that's a great question, Seth, because if I got the vote, right, if I were to get the vote, not what I think the committee will do, because those are two different things.
Yep.
Who I would put in, because if I were the committee, well, I can't say that I would say, well, we don't have automatic qualifiers, because you got to play by the rules. But the goal of the committee to me, Seth, should be let's get the 12 best teams in there. Yep. We've got the automatic qualifiers. There's only so much we can do there. But all the at-larges, let's get the 12 best teams in. I weigh strength of schedule. I weigh head-to-head. I think the games have to matter. I don't know how you can look at South Carolina and say they're not one of the 12 best teams in the country. I would even not have a problem putting them and Alabama, we'll say, in. But if I have to pick one of those 3, 12 best teams in the country, I would go South Carolina. And there'd be a lot of – and so here's the thing, Seth. I'd put in South Carolina. Who I think's going to get in is Alabama. That's who I think's going to get in, right? Because and I totally respect it. I get it, the head-to-head. I totally understand the head-to-head. Like, I think all 3 of them, Seth, you could tell all of them to shut up because they don't have an argument. Like, all of you need to stop. Right? Yeah. You all messed up at some point to put yourself, especially Bama and Ole Miss. Like, you fumbled at the finish line. It was on a silver platter, and you couldn't finish it off. And I'm not saying you should just get the spot because you got hot end of year and won 6 in a row, but I also think, too, like the evolution of teams, South Carolina has gotten so significantly better since week 1. 100%. Whereas, I don't know, Ole Miss and Alabama, Not so much. Like if I listen, if South Carolina, Alabama right now played on a neutral field, I'd take South Carolina. South Carolina, Ole Miss played on a neutral field, it'd be a little dicier for me because Ole Miss really took it to them the first time. But I don't know, man. There's nobody in the country playing better than the Gamecocks. So if I had to pick one, I'd probably go South Carolina. I would say of those three, Seth, they're the most deserving. That's where we get in that really tricky combo, right? Most deserving, best, resume, all that other stuff. But I think South Carolina would be the most deserving of those three. I understand those who would fight me against that and bring up the head-to-head. I totally get that.
To your point, though, that's supposed to be the point of the committee, right? Is that we have humans in the room. I can't remember if it was Stuart Mandel or who it was that tweeted it out. It was one of my favorite tweets of the year and said, oh, wait, so I can go to Dallas all weekend and I can eat free ice cream and we're just putting the people with the least amount of losses in order? Okay, I'll sign up for that. And it's like,
yeah,
it's sad, but unfortunately that's kind of how it's played out so far.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've hated about that. It's like they said on the show last week about, because they had Miami one spot ahead of Georgia, and they were like, well, Georgia's going to play Georgia Tech, and that'll be a common opponent, and depending on what Georgia does against Georgia Tech, that'll be a differentiator because Miami lost. I'm like, I don't need to see the game against Georgia Tech to know Georgia is a better football team than Miami. Right. Like, to your point, Seth, that's been for me the most frustrating part of it. And I don't want to be one of these people that just goes on and on and on about the playoff because we've all got our gripes and it is what it is. And at some point, it's like, all right, man, like you're just rambling to ramble or complaining to complain. But to your point, wins and losses matter. But Seth, who are we kidding? It's not as simple as like, let's bunch up all the one-loss teams and the two-loss teams and the three-loss teams. Like, we got to stop pretending all this stuff is equal. And I know people get tired. They say it's SEC bias. The SEC has earned the bias. The SEC's earned the benefit of the doubt. A 9-3 Georgia or a 9-3 Bama or a 9-3 Ole Miss or 9-3 South Carolina, they've been through a different grind than Boise State, than Miami, than SMU, than Notre Dame. Like not every one-loss team is better than every two-loss team. How is that hard to comprehend? I mean, it's not. So, but they want to like make it this neat uniform thing. It's like, guys, it's not right. That's you, to your point, Seth, you're being lazy and let's just group up all the, fewest losses when it's like, you're not really looking at it with a critical eye, ranking the best teams in the country. You're not when you do that. I'm sorry, you're not. Because strength of schedule has to matter. It has to matter. Who you are playing has to matter. Like, Notre Dame's schedule's not equal to what Georgia went through this year. Like, can we stop? It's just it's nuts, man. It's nuts, truly.
Notre Dame's a good example, too, because think if any SEC program had caught a loss from NIU on their home field, it'd be like, I don't know. It'd be this fodder for indictment of the conference. Whereas with Notre Dame, everybody's like, oh, well, they should still get in.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here, man? Well, look, Chris, we appreciate you coming on, brother. We love your insight. Love what you're doing. Please tell our listeners how they can support you.
Seth, I appreciate you having me on, man. Always a pleasure, and would love to do it again soon. Yeah, we're at SEC Unfiltered, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you get your content. You can find us there. Also, YouTube, podcast, same thing, SEC Unfiltered, and our website, secunfiltered.com. So stay tuned. We'll have full SEC championship coverage. We're reacting to all the playoff rankings going live, so make sure you subscribe and follow along and, rolling it. And we also cover basketball and baseball, too. So we're not just football. Also, we've got the SEC ACC Challenge in basketball this week, and our basketball coverage will continue to heat up as we get further into the season. Conference play starting in January, which, Seth, is crazy to say that basketball conference plays around the corner. So, but, man, I appreciate you having me on. Always a pleasure, and best of luck to the Dogs this weekend.
You got an open invitation anytime, brother. Guys, if y'all are not already following Chris and the boys at SEC Unfiltered, make sure and get on that. They are working hard, grinding, and always putting out great content and doing it, man. So keep doing what y'all are doing, brother. We enjoy it, and we're supporting y'all, man.
Seth, I appreciate it, man. Same here for you guys, and let's definitely do it again soon.